Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our last session in Ramadan. It's our sixth virtual session, and we are hosting, so glad to host Mr. Mohamed Ebrahim from Gallup. Without any further ado, Mr. Mohamed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Samir. I hope my voice is clear now.
Yes, sir, your voice is clear. So the session has been recorded and it's all yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for Bahrain Training Society for giving us this opportunity. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello and welcome to this webinar by Gallup. My name is Mohamed Ebrahim, and I lead Gallup's business in the Middle East, and we're here to talk today about leading through disruption. We're really dealing with a new world. While COVID-19 has created unprecedented disruptions in how we live, how we work, and how we do business, it also has opened up opportunities for us to think harder about how we organize ourselves and how we continue our social life amidst physical distancing and achieve our missions in different ways that we've never thought we would be possible. This crisis has really shown us um, the importance of making the right decisions in the right time. It's really a difference of 1 week could really affect the lives of millions of people. So I just wanted to take a minute to ask Samira, is this screen showing the full screen here, or do you see the full screen?
So what we're seeing here is the screen itself with someone typing on the laptop and then your video. So it's the speaker's view,
Okay.
right?
Okay, got it. So it's really about resiliency and agility. So how do we quickly adapt, plan, seize opportunities, will define how we come out of this, stronger or not. So today we don't really hope that we'll give you a lecture. So as much as possible, we want to have discussions, we want to have a chance for you to contribute. So let's just start. So we'll start with how the pandemic really slowed our momentum, and then we'll talk about how this pandemic has affected how we lead, how we work, and how we connect and build communities. Then we'll talk about how organizations are coming back in Asia and how do you plan your return. Sounds good. So let's start with the Middle East, really led by Saudi Arabia. We're driving 300 kilometers an hour back in February. When COVID-19 hit and slowed us down, slowed our momentum down, the first and foremost, this is a human tragedy, affected millions of lives between infections and deaths, and almost paralyzed our social system, including education, healthcare, markets, and the sustainable development of our nations. In terms of infection numbers and rates, our region was not as highly impacted as the rest of the world, like US and Europe. I think mainly due to the centralized and swift response by our governments. However, while the curve has been slowed down, we're still at it, and there is a lot of uncertainties as and when do we expect life to go back to normalcy. The pandemic has also come up with a double whammy with the drop in oil prices, the collapse of oil prices due to the falling global demand due to the pandemic, and then the oversupply has stabilized, but prices are significantly depressed compared to just 3 months ago. This brings further pressure on GCC countries' budgets and their ability to support the private sector during this crisis. Um, so as a result, we see that the IMF expects the global economy to shrink by 3% this year. On a larger level, there is a bigger impact on richer countries with expectations of over 6% of a drop versus emerging countries we're expecting to drop by 1%. So the economy has restricted really how we spend our budgets on developmental and infrastructure, but also created decreased consumer confidence and increased unemployment. Um, think about your personal case. You'd stop spending on things that are not necessary. You'll save more as much as possible. You'll not invest in things that you wouldn't know that would be really help even things that are moving up right now, like digital services. We see that investments are holding down. Despite this impact, we know that from the data from multiple sources that optimism remains high, especially in our region. Um, there is hope and ways where organizations support people in effectively managing this crisis. Our hope is that we capture the opportunities that come to us and be able to do that. And for that reason, I think we could spend a week talking about all the things that COVID has created, but what matters to us is today to talk about how we lead. And I think a lot of you have a direct contribution on how our leaders are responding to this. So we'll spend some time talking about that, and then we'll talk about how we work and then how we build communities. So let's just start with an exercise. Samira, if we could pull our first poll. What is the biggest challenge that is facing your organization today?
So we just launched the poll, and you have the
You can select. Yeah, the
yeah.
first, communication is the biggest challenge facing your organization. Remote working, is it workforce burnout? Is it agility? Is it digitization? Is it managing performance? Is it maintaining customer base? Is it returning to work strategy?
Right. So we have 30% answer, waiting for the rest. 40% answer. Let's see. So Mohammed, you can see the answers are quite confusing, right? It's overlapping. You will be like, I want to select all.
Well,
So,
what it's telling you, Samira, is really leaders have a lot to shuffle and a lot to manage right now.
yeah.
And of course, managing and maintaining customer base is going to be a big challenge. And we see that remote working, and it's an element that we talk about today.
And let's see. Let me just end the poll and share the results with everyone. So can you see it now?
Yes, so we see top of the list, maintaining the customers. Then we have remote working. Then equally, we have communication, managing performance, and returning to work. So we'll touch on these elements in our discussion today. Um,
Shall I
we
stop
have,
sharing?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we've really done a research to see what employees need. And what employees need today from organization is four things: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. We'll go through these. But during crisis time, during this time, uh, employees want leaders to have a clear plan. How we will retain our customers? How are we going to do remote working? How are we going to come back to work? Having that clear plan is important for employees, but being also prepared to do their work, being equipped with the equipment and materials and resources to do their work is extremely critical. Then supervisors, keeping them informed, continuous communication is a critical element that employees need to keep coming around everything else that we discussed. Then organizations caring about employee well-being. And what we see during less volatile times, these numbers in the GCC are higher than normal average numbers globally. That 51% have confidence in leaders being able to successfully manage emerging challenges. But then 33% have clear idea of the direction of the future. We do trust our leaders, but the communication that we get might not be enough to see what is the future going to hold. But then 32% strongly agree that their organization cares about their overall well-being. Now, when we looked at these numbers again, and this is from our global data from multiple countries on how people feel the leadership in their companies are responding to the crisis, data are showing that there is a significant drop by 7%. Roughly 3 out of 10 people strongly agree that they have confidence in the leaders to be able to manage the crisis. Now, this figure will vastly be different in different places. But what we're hearing from our clients in the region is that there are some leaders who are reacting by under communicating because they don't know what is going to happen and don't want to make a mistake with their communication. Others are initially reacting by over communicating too much messages, which is becoming really a white noise. So while leaders are creating their own blueprint to navigate these crises, your role supporting these leaders is to help them by creating a compelling vision for navigating through the crisis. How do you communicate authentically, transparently, and candidly? How do you provide managers with talking points around the vision for their teams? And how do you gather feedback from employees? Go back to employees and ask them, are you getting too much information? Are you getting not enough information? So what we need to know is really create philosophies and guidelines around communication. And for us to do that, what we've done in today's presentation is we've structured it around the Gallup research that we've done around the needs of the followers. So we've conducted an extensive study on and asked people to recollect a leader that has the most positive impact in their daily life. Then we asked them to name 3 words to describe that leader. And based on that, we've collected basically 10,000 responses, 10,000 respondents, and 30,000 responses, individual words. And what we found is that 4 words sorted the most with significant margin. And these words are trust, really being honest and candid and doing what's right with heart. And then stability, is there a sense of clarity and competence? And then compassion, am I cared for as an employee? And fourth is hope. It is really about our direction and our future. So we'll go in details on each slide and then tackle elements of how we lead and how we work and how we affect our communities in each of these. So let's start with the trust. So trust is really important to employees to fulfill 2 critical needs to make them productive. First is knowing what's expected of them at work and being prepared to do that job. These are trust building principles. So when we talk about trust, there are a couple of tactical elements to be considered. First, we see a sense of honesty, integrity, and respect that rose to the top when people talk about great leaders. I find this truly fascinating that high performance teams rarely discuss trust because they truly live trust. So when you hear teams talking about trust, it's usually low performing teams, and you mostly hear them talking constantly and negatively about it. When you see that leaders build trust through actions, doing what's right and doing it with heart. Four, we see that leaders bring the human elements through their leadership, being candid and honest about the difficult situation that you have in. Sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know. Um, I really like this quote. It says that trust is like the air we breathe by Warren Buffett. Um, when it's present, nobody really notices, but when it's absent, everybody notices. So how can we build trust in an organization? We know that trust is much needed right now more than ever. So first, we need to bring up ethical standards at the core of our organization identity. We need to model these standards in action and focus back on our mission and purpose. Uh, as you coach leaders and help them overcome these challenges, you need to help them with 2 things. One is leading at their own level. We see often that leaders lead at 1 or 2 levels below what they should lead. 2, they need to have focused and frequent conversations with their team. They need to cultivate shared accountability through dialogue with their team. Here are a couple of reasons why people tend not to lead at their own level. One, they don't know their employees well. Uh, they don't think their employees have the talent or knowledge needed to do their tasks. They think that they know better how to do things than the employees do, or sometimes they don't have time to delegate, or they will tell you that it's easier and faster to do it themselves, which explains a major element in our research that shows that 70% of variance in employee engagement goes back to the manager and to the leader themselves, who are not able to do that to engage their teams. So the second element, now that we've built a trust, is really stability. And as we think about stability, I want you to think about this example. So prior to COVID-19, I spent majority of my time in Bahrain airport, really more than I spent it in the office, traveling for my clients. And when you fly and hit a turbulence, a bit of a turbulence, what is the first thing that you look at? uh, when you're busy and eating or watching newspaper or something, the first thing that you do when you head to turbulence is look at the flight attendants to see how do they react, and do you see them calm, or uh, what what sense do you get from them? And when you see them calm, you get the sense that things are okay, and then you feel calm yourself. So one of the things to be mindful of is the manner in which people react and make decisions. We have a Gallup senior scientist, Daniel Kahneman, who was the first psychologist to win the Nobel Prize in economics. So what Danny did really is he looked into how people go through the process of making decisions. And what we found is that our decisions are much driven by emotions than by facts. Even if we think that we're using rational facts to make decisions, they're highly influenced by emotional aspects. The reason why we talk about this here is that as a leader, you need to be mindful of the fact that when people show up to you at these times, they are distressed. They are showing up as emotional beings. So it becomes really important to think about not only how we are regulating our self chat to manage our own image, but also not showing up in a way that creates more distress for people, some in a way that creates more calm and confidence. But also a second part of stability is thinking about how work has changed and how we have changed the way we work. So if we look at our research on working from home, uh, we've moved from 25% to about 60%. So that's double the normal working from home. But in many organizations, it's really going from 0 to 100. While this has increased, most leaders are largely unprepared to manage their teams. So when we check how employees feel about it in the region, we see positive feedback and negative feedback. The positive feedback, people are actually feeling more productive. They're feeling more flexible. They're adjusted to work from home, and they're feeling supported by IT and like these nice features like Zoom and Teams. But then we see that they're complaining about lack of transparency, communication, expectations from management, performance management. We see that although you're working from home and with your kids, you're actually having less time with your kids and with your family because there are less boundaries. We see that the time to end your day has kind of disappeared. You're getting calls anytime. Uh, so as you also socialize less because you're in home, you're not seeing your colleagues, you're not going out, there is a tendency for us to have lesser well-being, and we'll talk about this later. So when we studied the well-being, the working from home, we've been studying this for a long time. So at Gallup, we measure something called the employee engagement. And the employee engagement is how people are connected to you. They're at their best when they're fully engaged. They're giving you their energy. And when you see what you see in this graph is the relationship between engagement and working from home. So when you start to the left, that is not working from home at all. 32% of employees are engaged. But when you go to partially working from home, less than 4 days a week, 46% of the people are engaged. But when you move to full-time working from home, the surprise is that engagement goes down. And the reason for that, and you may have experienced this already, is that when we started working from home, it's really nice and we're starting to adjust. But as this period prolongs, you're really feeling the stress and that the less social time we have people is creating more stress on us mentally. Um, we see that having to do this life balance is kind of hard to manage. So like I said, what we're seeing here is that companies are trying to find the right balance, and some companies that you've seen in the news are coming to say, listen, I don't I don't think we should come back to work. Twitter came back and said, listen, I don't think we should come back to work at all. So why don't we, if anybody wants to work from home on a long-term basis, that you should do that. So we need to rethink our long-term work from home strategy. Who needs to work from home? Who could work productively from home? And it's going to be creating a holistic strategy around that. Please remember, there is no first mover advantage to going back to office. So we need to think about that carefully and strategically. Because if we don't think about that, I see that burnout is coming. You must have felt that as we're starting to stretch working from home. We need to think about how do we create a well-being strategy for helping employees manage both home and life. Think about creating that strategy, but think about how do your managers and leaders show up and help people focus. We see that moving from boss to coach is critical for us to achieve the right balance when it comes to individual well-beings, because managers will be critical in helping employees uh, have clarity on what is required from them through focused conversations. So what we want is not a boss who issues orders and monitors details. We hear the stories about bosses asking people to send pictures of their work, to being a coach who focuses energy and strengths on driving performance. A coach does not have one annual conversation, but continuous conversation throughout the year. So a coach cares about the employee well-being and help them overcome these challenges. This is really a human crisis and requires us to act human, to be able to to help employees pass this period. Talking about human, this takes us to our third element. Now we've built a trust and stability for employees. Our third element is really compassion. And when we think about compassion, we're thinking about, am I cared for? Am I understood? So let's start with another poll. Samira, if we could pull our second poll. So let me ask you this question. What feelings have you experienced yesterday?
Okay.
Okay, so have you felt enjoyment? Have you smiled, laughed? Do you feel well rested? Do you feel respected? Do you feel stressed, worried? Anger? So it seems like our group is really sleeping well.
So we have 70% answers. Waiting for a couple of more. Let's give them 5 more seconds.
Let's do that.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's end this and let's share the results.
Awesome. So we have a lot of people who've well rested, and that's good. We have our trainers and people who are helping our leaders having good time to help focus people. And one of the things that we see in our research is really the different picture. What we are seeing in our research is that leaders, especially people who are in the situation that they need to manage the financials and the physical well-being of people, we're seeing that they have high levels of stress and worry, and that's because they have a lot to manage right now. They have a lot of focus around their health, people's health, physical well-being, dealing with the loneliness. So as leaders, we need to really think about how do we show up. We need to be cognizant of how these crises are affecting our employees. So our research shows that employees who receive compassion are more likely to continue to work in the organization, more likely to connect with their customers, and more likely to be productive and profitable. So why is compassion really important right now? So if we look at the picture of different demographics, we have singles who have loads of free time and high levels of loneliness. We have parents. If you have kids, you must have really struggled with this, helping the kids with the homeworks and the managing work yourself. And then families and societies really not disconnected. They're disconnected from the rituals and routines and from the ghabgas and from the uh, things that they used to do. So it is affecting how people look and how people evaluate their life. And the measure for this is thriving. So we measure how people evaluate their life through a metric called life evaluation. So we ask people to evaluate how they evaluate their own life, one being the lowest, and then 10 being the best life. And then we ask them to also evaluate their life in 5 years. And when you evaluate your life now at 7 or more, and then evaluate your future life at 8 or more, that's basically a thriving. And if you evaluate your life on both this life and in 5 years, then you are basically struggling. um, so the percentage of thriving, this picture is for adults in the US, but we see uh, similar trends everywhere. Is the percentage of people thriving has dropped to the Great Recession levels. Daily significant stress and worry has spiked to unprecedented levels. We see significant levels of anxiety about personal finances. So people are really indicating that they need help when it comes to mental health. 76% of people have experienced a great deal of fair levels of disruption in their life. So I think one of the things we need to be cognizant of is an absence of deliberative intervention. We should expect a decline in motivation, performance, and well-being. And you may ask, okay, why is that and what can we do? So in our research, when we discussed the thriving, when we created the construct around thriving, we wanted to find what drives that thriving. So we've looked into thousands of responses to find what affects that. And these are the 5 elements that affects how people evaluate their life: their career, their sense of purpose, what do they do, and what gives them meaning in life. uh, there is a big impact on career right now. And then you have social, having strong relationships, loved relationships. Again, you have people who are disconnected from their families. In many ways, they're either living by themselves or in very close family. Financials, of course, there's a big burden currently financially on organizations. Thanks to God, in Bahrain, we have a lot of stimulus that have been helpful in people stopping the loans, um, helping with the salaries for the private sector. But people with businesses have a huge, uh, especially at businesses that were not able to continue working same as normal, big stress around financials. Community, it's having a community where you're feeling safe and having pride in your community. The social gatherings, the activities that we have, the rituals are all disconnected. And then the physical, having good health and not feeling pain. Again, there are 2 elements to this: worrying about your own physical or your family's physical health because of the COVID situation. So there are a lot of elements that we need to look at holistically. So as an organization, we know that as a leader, you're in difficult situations trying to figure out your financials and moving parts for your organization. But you need to also think about holistic strategy for your employee well-being. So one is, do we know where people stand when it comes to current state of well-being? Can we help employees find a future state? Help them bridge these gaps and create actions and creative ways for people to impact their well-being from a holistic perspective. So with that, we go into our last element, which is hope. Hope is, now that you've developed trust and you've developed compassion and stability, people want hope. When we look at leaders who were able to successfully win elections, like in the US, they were able to create that hope. And it's a strong foundation for you to inspire people to the future. One of Gallup's tribe members and author of Hope Happens put this quote: "See, hope is the belief that the future will be better than the present, along with the belief that you have the power to make it so." So as leaders, how do we create that hope? How do we make hope happen? How do we operationalize it? Um, so when we have goals, when we set goals, ideas, and energies to move in the future, we're able to create hope. The biggest thing that you can empower people to have hope is to provide them with a clear goal. And after you've cleared a clear goal, you need to utilize everyone's ideas to come up with ways and possible pathways to achieve that goals. And then you need to help employees with energy. You need to create that emotional motivation for people to action on these ideas. How do we utilize people's individual talents and strengths to help them activate these ideas? Going into the nature of people at this stage can be really helpful in creating the pathway to the future. I'll take you back to this. This is very critical for us to build hope. It's having a clear plan, helping employees uh, be well prepared to do their work, and then having a supervisor who keep employees informed, and then taking care of employees' well-being. These are all critical elements for us to demonstrate to our employees that we have hope, we have trust, and we have compassion and stability. With that, let's move into how do we help employees to return to work. So part of building this plan for hope, we need to think about what other organizations are doing to manage the go back to work strategy. And we have a lot of examples from China now, and uh, there are a few elements that we need to think about. One important element is designing your return to work playbook, right? So that's basically the playbook where you'll put together all the COVID-19 management strategies and policies. As you plan this playbook, it's critical to think about when, but also how. So this includes essential elements like restrictions on travel, social distancing protocols, screening procedures, reinforcing hygiene and wellness standards, disease management procedures. We need to think about these things because um, no one really knows if we close this round, there will not be another wave coming up after this because no one has experienced this type of disease before. So we need to plan as if there is a second wave. So these elements need to be there in a phased approach, and health and safety becomes a critical and important. But you need to also consider about your work, kind of your workforce management policies, your employee development and performance management under the new plan. How do you boost morale and engagement? Uh, we need to rethink about employee compensation and benefits. Uh, how do we do business going forward is a big element that will affect everything else. I think one of the elements is how do we retain customers, and we have a whole webinar that is coming up. We'd like to invite you to around how do we manage the customer base. But um, managing business going forward and thinking about the future, we need to rethink our purpose and we need to rethink our culture. Uh, Everything that we do needs to connect to that mission and purpose, and and it's going to be impacted on what are the changing customer behaviors that are going to feed into your strategy and purpose. So studying the customer is going to be critical in driving this whole return strategy. We see that companies are returning back to work in China. Microsoft has sent half of its 6,200 workers in China back to work. And these workers are required to wear masks and adhere to social distancing rules. They have all kind of safety instructions. Chinese food delivery have split their employees into three kind of groups, A, B, and C shifts, and they do these kind of rotations every period. Oppo, smartphone maker, management have tied employees' face masks using their KPIs. so so you see that safety and healthcare elements are important in all the current considerations of companies returning back to work. Um, so how Gallup is helping organizations? We're helping organizations through reimagining their customer experience. What are the customer strategies? how do you figure out what are the things that customers really need? What are the service values? And what are the behaviors we need to build going forward? How do you reshape your culture to meet your customer experience? How do you redefine your purpose, your brand and culture? And then how do you help your leaders drive that through performance, through development and coaching? How do you drive succession planning to achieve the new culture? And then reigniting your workforce is back to work perspective, basically building your workbook for returning to work, considering well-being, remote work strategies, organization designs based on the new realities. So with that, I would like to open up to questions and answers. But before then, we'd like to invite you then to our next webinar, who's going to be around customer centricity, inshallah, after Eid, going through the whole cycle from knowing your customers to retaining them and growing them. With that, Samira, I would like to open it up for questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. That was an insightful presentation. Quite interesting to see how data gathered around this. And it's something that we don't actually see, we live it. So regardless of what we say, everybody's impacted from this specific situation. Let's see. So the question and answer space is open for all participants. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll allow you to, I'll open the microphone and you may shoot your question. There you go, Dr. Assam. دكتور عصام تفضل بقى أنا خليت الميكروفون open حقك تفضل.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
It's not a question, to be honest. It's just to thank Mohamed Ebrahim for his beautiful speech and a very informative lecture. To be honest, I learned a lot tonight, and especially about those areas that he covered, with what we have to do in order to overcome what's happening in the whole world, especially with trust. And then he talked about stability and the rest of the items that he spoke, compassion and hope, which is really important. It's nothing, to be honest. It's only just to say thank you, Mohamed, for being with us here today at BSTD, and hope to see you again and in the future, in very soon future. Now I'll be one of your participants in your webinar soon, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Islam. I really appreciate you hosting me here.
Thank you, Dr. Assam. Thank you so much. And let's see, who has a question? If you have a question, please raise your hand. And I'll open the microphone for you. Let's see. So we have, okay, so Mr. Osama Jabiri is saying, God forbidden, if we have another attack from COVID-19 or other Bismillah alayna yani, or other viruses, are we ready from previous experience or we need to start from beginning? Interesting question. What do you think?
I think organizations will, from country level, I think countries are already, and we have COVID-19 task forces that are already thinking about these different scenarios. Organizations, I see big variability between organizations, to be honest with you. We have organizations that are thinking about that we need to plan that this is the new normal, and we need to put the way that we run our organizations need to be cognizant of that. So the workplace is becoming really rethinking what is the role of the workplace. Are we going to go there like we used to and sleep in the office, or is it going to be a place for us to go and maybe meet sometimes? Is it going to be a place for people to get work? How is the role of the meeting rooms? Are we still going to use meeting rooms or not? So there is a huge levels of variability between different organizations, between different industries also. Think about industries that will be changed for life, like your luxury hotels. are they going to do the same journey? No, we're already talking with multiple large luxury hotels about reshaping how the customer journey is, and when the customer comes, how are you going to create social distancing? Because people themselves, the customer, because even if you open up everything, customers themselves are not going to have the same behaviors that they used to. They're going to want to take extra precautions, and safety is going to be extremely important to them. So as an organization, how are you building that? Organizations that take the lead in being proactive and thinking about ways to serve their customers and to meet their behavioral needs are going to be ahead of organizations who do not.
So
I
what
hope,
we
I don't
say
know if
is,
I answered your question.
so it's like what knowledge we are taking from this is like a learning society, learning organization, learning systems. اللي بناخد this as something that we can build on for other type of let's say challenges, not only coronavirus, whatever might come in our way. Now, it is kind of interesting to see, you know, some organizations are actually changing into, it was kind of beneficially if we remove a lot of intermediate or intermediary services, we actually reduce cost and customer behavior happen to be less complex now. That's interesting, but switching cost is cheaper for them. So let's see, Mr. Salman Suhail is raising his hand. Mr. Salman, I'll open the microphone for you, sir. Go ahead. Mr. Salman.
Yes, hello.
Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Salman, شلونك يبا؟ شو أخبارك?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mohammed. An excellent presentation. Quickly, I mean, I'm in a group in WhatsApp with about 174 HR managers, and the feeling I get from the discussion with them that they are expecting things will come normal as it used to be before Corona, and they're almost sure that this will happen. Now, can you say something to those people? I mean, to help me with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Salman. Well, I don't think anybody has a magic ball to know the future. No one actually has. No one has knowledge on how does this virus reacts, and is it like the flu where when you get it and then you've basically gotten you've built your immune system so it doesn't come again. So if you catch it again, no one knows. It's only been 4 months since we've had it. Or is it more like viruses like the chicken pox? Once you've get it, khalas, no, it's not going to happen to you again throughout your life. I don't think anyone knows the answers to these things. As organizations, we need to be ready for all different scenarios. And as HR, you need to be able to capture the opportunities presented to you. So what does remote working means to you as an organization in terms of, I think Samira mentioned saving costs, in terms of flexibility, in terms of accepting maybe talents from different countries. You need to be to act according to the different scenarios and probably activate different scenarios based on what happens. But if they're confident that it will never happen again, I don't know what is the source of information they have around this.
Yeah, it kind of cracks me up. Like if things are going normal, I think sometimes we are kind of emotional based societies where our reactions kind of weird. We do drink very hot tea كرك في عز الصيف, but it's always normal for us يعني. And again, yeah, the world and the human history is full of examples of tragedies, and we are very strong species, that's for sure. But how the systems will work around it, that will be an interesting thing to see. So we have Ms. Yusra Hamed. She wrote, thank you very much for the amazing session. The COVID-19 is an entire learning journey, of course, for all of us. We had made this work on employees' engagement and looking forward for a real outcome end of this month. Inshallah, Gallup, if what we did worked well or not. If there is a specific KPIs and measurements, I think, yeah, if people who, as a team, kept a KPI, like end of this project or end of this challenge, this is our success factor. we can actually measure that.
Right.
There are two questions
Sure.
in the panel from Mr. Ebrahim Radi. Mr. Ebrahim, would you like خلنا نشوفك إذا أنت موجود هنا within Mr. Ebrahim بفتح لك الميكروفون. Why don't you ask it directly? Here you go, sir. أستاذ إبراهيم رضي.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام والرحمة. تفضل أستاذنا.
طيبين. شكرا أخوي محمد على البرزنتيشن الجميل والمعلومات الجيدة. بس حبيت أخذ رأيك. What's your view about you have showcases about a lot about the US market and US workforce and how they are managing the COVID-19. Is there any differences between our region here in Bahrain and the US responses when it comes to employee engagement as well as reaching and dealing with customers?
That's a very good question. On an overall level, we actually don't see that the COVID-19 and even other crises for that matter, we don't see that has affected employee engagement, by the way. I did not, I mean, we have a limited time today to show, I didn't show all the data we had. We, across the last 20 years, we've looked into all the crises that will happen. Employee engagement is usually not impacted from a macro level. So when we measure employee engagement in Bahrain, employee engagement in the US, we don't see big shifts in employee engagement with the crises themselves. We've seen for usually well-being goes up and down with engagement. In this crisis, well-being has went down, employee engagement actually stayed the same. Now, in different organizations, you'll have different reactions based on, you remember the four things, having a plan and creating clarity and helping people be prepared for their job. We see differences on an organization level when it comes to employee engagement, but on a macro level, we don't see big differences. In general, the US is more engaged than the rest of the world, and even here. And if you look at the engagement in Bahrain, we're at 16-17% engaged versus the US is about 31%. So there's a huge difference. And our engagement, that's a whole section that we can, your question needs a whole session. But our engagement has dropped in the last few years. It's actually increased our last year, but we are lesser than the US in terms of engagement. I don't think that we haven't done our measurement this year for engagement in Bahrain. I don't think it would be impacted by COVID-19.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer there as well. We yet don't know what makes them engage and then what challenges are bringing. Are they more engaged or engaged in a different way? So we do have Mr. Abdurrahman Awadi. أستاذ عبد الرحمن العوضي سويتك unmute. ممكن أنت تفتح الميكروفون عندك and you can ask your question, sir. أستاذ عبد الرحمن. All right, so maybe he's away from.
He's muted.
Yeah, so you can unmute yourself. And then, okay, let's take a question by the time.
There is a question by Assam.
Yeah.
What would be your piece of advice for job seekers during the time where job opportunities are very limited? And that's an extremely good question. I mean, unemployment is jumping up in the whole world. Thank God for the actions our government has taken to protect workers, but looking at unemployment numbers are jumping up, and a lot of people now who don't have a job would find it really difficult to find a job at this stage. And my advice would be to really think about yourself differently. Is not to look, if you look at most of the resumes that we look at, where you see experience, I've worked this much in this place, I have an accounting degree, I have this kind of knowledge. So our focus is mostly knowledge, experience, tenor. And we need to think about our talents, natural talents. So we need to understand what are we strong at. So at Gallup, we have one of the most used assessments called the Strengths Finder. It's taken 22 million times, and it finds the natural talents that don't change. So think about things that never change since you're 16. For example, having ideas, a lot of ideas. That's me. I have a lot of ideas all the time, and as long as I remember, I always do that. Think about you hitting the مثلا an elevator button multiple times, right? This is a talent. Asking a lot of questions in class, that's a talent. Making a lot of relationships to people you never knew, that's a talent. Making strong relationships with people, but not a lot of people, but special people, that's a talent. Think about how you execute things. Do you achieve things? Do you actually use your responsibility to achieve things? Do you influence people? So what is your natural configuration, and who are you in terms of strengths and talents, and what kind of a role would you add value in? Because the type of jobs that the market has is changing very, very rapidly with digitization and the role of AI and how we're doing things. So we need to think about reskilling ourselves, but there are things that don't change in us, which is our talents. And these are the things that we need to know about. What we've seen in the job market, a lot of people don't know their talents. They don't know who they are, what are they strong in. So they study something and they go work, and then it becomes really boring and they hate it. And it becomes a boring job they don't enjoy. One of the elements of engagement is I do what I do best every day. Do I enjoy what I do? And that's highly connected to you doing something that connects with your talents. And if you don't know what your talents are, it's hard to find that job that is people are going to feel convinced to hire you for. Again, that's a whole session that we can have around finding talent and understanding talent. We have a question by Bahija.
Yeah, we do have a question there, and just and we do have a comment as well from Mr. Osama Jabri, who says the world experienced 2 incidents, SARS and bird flu. Why this one is kind of like a big thing happening, and countries and corporates are reacting differently. That's an interesting observation, and yeah, quite legitimate question.
Right. I think the behavior of the virus is in this case is quite different, because the other ones, in the case of SARS, the transmission happens. And I'm not an epidemiologist. The infection happens with in the case of this virus happens before you have symptoms. So its spread is crazy. My cousin actually got tested for this a couple of days ago. He felt nothing, and it was just a random testing, and he has the virus. He was tested positive, and until today, that was 3 days ago, until today he doesn't have symptoms. So he could go around and transmit the virus to everybody else, but nobody knows. And I think the other viruses, that case is much lesser in terms of transition than this. So the spread in this one is the big element, which is why it's everywhere now. And the numbers that we get today, they're always the reality of the numbers is always higher, 3 times higher than the reported numbers. That's, I think, why this virus is quite dangerous.
Yeah, which makes us think again, is this virus as vital as any other disease human beings get, such as obesity and heart disease and diabetes? So let's see, Mrs. Bahija, I'll open your microphone. أستاذة بهيجة تفضلي. أستاذة بهيجة الميكروفون اوبن معك. تفضلي. أهلا وسهلا.
سمعوني؟
اي نعم سمعك أستاذة.
اي ما علي، انا بتكلم عربي لو سمحتوا لي.
تفضلي.
الصوت واضح؟
100% صوتك واضح. تفضلي الشيخة.
شكرا يا أستاذ محمد على هالمحاضرة الجميلة، وحقيقة كان فيها كثير من المعلومات الدقيقة حول الموضوع. أنا من رأيي أن العمل عن بعد أو العمل من المنزل اللي احنا اضطرينا له كان له فوائد وكثير من المميزات اللي الناس اكتشفوها. من ضمنها أن الحين هي العمل من المنزل أقل تكلفة، فما في داعي لها المكاتب الكثيرة والأثاث الفاخر والمواصلات، وأيضاً أثرها على البيئة أن احنا ممكن نشتغل كثير من الأعمال من البيت. من الناحية الاجتماعية كان هذا العمل من المنزل أفضل للمرأة، يعني هي تقدر توفق بين حياتها وبين عملها. فأنا أعتقد أن الحياة بعد كوفيد-19 ما بترجع مثل ما كانت من قبل، لا يمكن، لأن في دروس كثيرة احنا تعلمناها، حتى التعليم والتدريب راح بيكون جزء كبير منه من عن بعد. فإيش رأيك أستاذ؟
100% اتفق معك. انت اليوم اولا هاي الجراف، هاي احنا عندنا الداتا قبل ما يصير كوفيد 19 ان الناس نفسهم شعورهم و their engagement و their performance increase with working from home with the flexible working from home، خصوصا حق فئات معينه. لكن في ناس مو كل الناس يمشي معاهم الورك فروم هوم. في ناس مثلا عندهم their talent configuration يقدر يشتغل من البيت ما عنده مشكله. في ناس اذا ما يشوف ناس شوي يعني يتعب، يحتاج السوشيال elements. فانت لازم ان ننظر الى الموضوع باستراتيجيه كامله واضحه تفيد المؤسسه من ناحيه البرودكتيفيتي والانجيجمنت وشلون بتستفيد المؤسسه. بس 100% ان الوضع ما بيرجع بنفس السابق، لان الازمه فتحت عيون الشركات على ان احنا بامكاننا بالفعل نسيف فلوس كثيره من خلال استراتيجيات كذي. والشيء الثاني الديجيتال يوز اوف تكنولوجيز. احنا نتكلم اليوم قالب عندنا شيء اسمه ذا CHRO راوند تيبل، وبيسعدني ان ابعث لكم بعض المعلومات عن اللي اكتشفناه من المؤسسات هذه. CHROs حق اكبر 750 مؤسسه في العالم نجتمع معهم من خلال راوند تيبلز فيها 10 او اكثر بشكل اسبوعي، في خلال الازمه اللي طافت بشكل يومي. يقول لك احنا ليش نرجع بنفس قبل؟ يعني احنا اليوم احنا قاعدين نكتشف ان احنا بامكاننا ندير المؤسسه عن طريق السكايب وعن طريق التيمز وعن طريق زوم. ف yes, we need to shrink our physical space. We need to think about digital learning. احنا كقالب كل عندنا courses حق engagement، عندنا courses حق performance، حق strengths، حق leaders. مؤسسات في دبي وفي الامارات وفي البحرين ما كانوا يبون اونلاين. Everything they wanted in person. Now we have 1-year programs, all virtual, all online, and people are seeing benefits of it. يعني انت من قبل مثلا في الكلاس روم لازم اللي قاعد ورا ما تشوفينه واللي قاعد قدام هو اللي يحصل الملاحظه، وفي ناس تتكلم اكثر من ناس. مع الاونلاين هالشيء قاعد يختلف، في ناس ما تحب تتكلم تطرش في الشات، وصاير الكل قريب من الانستراكتور. وفي نفس الوقت قاعدين نسوي بايت سايز انفورميشن، وقاعدين نسوي انتراكشنز ونسوي اكتيفيتيز ونسوي بولينج ونسوي اكسرسايزز. فتعليم عن بعد قاعد يدش في مجال جديد. اللي قاعدين نشوفه في تشاينا ان الحياه الطبيعيه عقب ما رجعنا اليوم مو قاعده ترجع بنفس المستويات اللي طافت. الشراء من الفيزيكال بليسز are not the same. اليوم في ناس عمرهم ما استخدموا online buying, now they use it and they know it's working. Why should they go back? So there are a lot of things that are happening positively out of this. This is what we opened the conversation with. الفائز اليوم من ناحيه مؤسسات ومن ناحيه دول، كيف ان احنا نستثمر هذه الفرص، وكيف ان احنا نختلق منتجات جديده، ونطلع بطرق جديده بالتعامل مع الكاستمرز. لان الكاستمرز اليوم they're less loyal than they used to. They know that shifting is now possible. Why should I continue to do the same thing as I do before? الفريم of compassion اللي مشينا فيه، compassion و trust و stability, this same framework you can apply it to your customers also. And again, in our webinar we will discuss how you apply it to your customers and create new ways to engage with your customers. بس بيغير يعني 100% اتفق وياك استاذه بهيجه، يعني بغير طرق كثيره. احنا لازم نفكر اليوم كيف ان احنا بامكاننا نستفيد من الطرق، نستفيد من الاشياء ونواصل نستخدمها في مؤسساتنا كبست براكتسز.
Right. شكرا استاذ محمد، استاذ بهيجة. So if we, let me see, do we have more questions to come from the participants, anybody wants to contribute with a thought, a question, a comment? And wow, that was a good time management there.
That was perfect.
So, Mr. Mohammed, on behalf of BSTD, I would love to thank you and thank Dr. Aslam for making this happen. Thank you for giving us from your time and so much insightful information for us to take better decisions in our businesses. We wish you all the best and looking forward to host you in our upcoming workshops.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Samira, and thank you all for giving us the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ma salam. Allah salam.
No. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your attendance, and we will send you a link for the evaluation and of course the recording. And if Mr. Mohammed allows, so we will share with you the material as well. Thank you so much. Good night.